Week 12 of the NFL season just wrapped up, and we have a fully loaded edition of the HBCU NFL Report brought to you guys by HBCU Game Day. Who else? I am Symone Stanley, as always, joined by Lute. And Lute, happy holidays. We still got our Thanksgiving set up in the studio. Is it too late to keep having Thanksgiving studios? Is it time to bring the Christmas studio in? What do you think?
We can hang on to it for a couple of more days. Let's get into December, then we can get into the Christmas deal.
So when do you put your tree up? You put your tree up at Thanksgiving, before or after Thanksgiving?
You don't even know who you're asking when you ask that question. I haven't celebrated Christmas in 47 years since I became a Muslim at the age of 19. But certainly,
excuse me.
Yeah, all my family does. They put up trees usually around the first week of December. So I spent Thanksgiving with them. Had a great Thanksgiving watching all the 3 football games, which of course we're going to talk about. But it is the season. That is the Christmas season, and I say it begins when December begins, which is this week.
Okay, so I'll give them a pass for still having the harvest set up in the studio. But Luke, we got a lot to get into, so let's get into it. We have to start with James Houston, making history with the Detroit Lions. We've talked here several times. James Houston was drafted by the Detroit Lions in the 6th round of the 2022 NFL Draft out of you got to give them all the E's, the Jackson State University. We've talked here each week. When are we going to see James? When are we going to see James? When are we going to see James? We got to see James in his NFL debut. No other day than Thanksgiving, the biggest day in football, the second biggest day outside the Super Bowl in football, and the biggest day for Lions fans. Thanksgiving, playing on Thanksgiving is their tradition. When is a better time to make your debut? And James Houston, wow, he stole the show. First of all, the Lions really stole the show from the Bills. Everybody, including myself, thought that the Bills were going to, blow the Lions out of town. But the Lions held their own, and it was in a large fact due to James Houston. First half of the game, he has a fumble recovery on special teams. He gets in on defense. He has a sack in the first half. And we keep talking about pivotal plays. He got a sack on Josh Allen that kept them out of field goal range, forced the Bills to have to punt. Then he got another sack in the second half, 2 sacks and a fumble recovery. That was the best performance by a Lions rookie in history. And what makes it so impactful? The Lions drafted Aiden Hutchinson, one of the highest recruits on defense, the sack machine out of Michigan. And James Houston outperformed Aiden Hutchinson's rookie debut performance. Should have had that man in the game.
And, one of the big things is he only got in for 5 defensive plays. So he had 2 sacks out of 5 defensive plays. That's a great percentage. That's almost 50% of the plays that he was in on. We've been waiting to see. He came out of Jackson State last year after posting 16 and a half sacks, was second in the SWAC to the Buck Buchanan Defensive Player of the Year award winner in the FCS, Isaiah Land out of Florida A&M. He had 16 and a half sacks. Coach Prime Sanders talked about his explosiveness, about what impact he was going to make in the NFL. And then we have to wait a whole 12 weeks, 11 weeks, if you want to call it that, before he actually even gets on the field. And it's not like the Lions have been any juggernaut of a defense, So, they drafted Aiden Hutchinson, drafted him in the first round. He came in all ballyhooed. And even when he was trying to make the team, and when they started the season, he was on the practice squad where he spent the first 11 weeks. They talked about they wanted him to get stronger. They wanted him to get bigger, all these kinds of things. But listen, he ran past the first sack, he ran past the right offensive tackle. And the second sack, he ran past the left offensive tackle and ran down Josh Allen both times. So you got to be wondering with their coach, Dan, whatever his name is at Detroit.
You got to be
wondering,
Dan
like,
Campbell.
Dan Campbell, so what's the deal, dude?
Right.
Why has he been sitting on the bench for 11 weeks?
Right.
And he comes in 5 defensive plays, he has 2 sacks. What would he have done had he been playing all season for your Lions, who are what are they, 4 and something or something like that? So anyway, the point of it is, this has been a year. I said in the story I did for Game Day this week, this has been a year where rookies and veterans have had their time in the sun. We've seen Jacoby Durant get an interception. We've seen Joshua Williams get an interception. We've seen a veteran like Antonio Hamilton get an interception. We've seen another veteran, Danny Johnson, out of Southern, playing for the Washington Commanders, get an interception. And here we are now that we have to wait 11 weeks before we see the guy who many thought would be drafted higher than the 6th round where Detroit took him when he came out last year. Many people thought he would go earlier than that, but he's spent all of this time basically languishing on the practice squad, gets his opportunity and takes full advantage. So kudos to him. One of the things he said was, he's been sitting on the practice squad, but he said this is an example when preparation meets opportunity. There's an old saying, I think it's attributed to Duke Snyder. My brother used to tell me, he says that luck is the residue of design. In other words, you don't just get lucky, but it has something to do with the work that James Houston has been doing on the practice squad, trying to wait for his opportunity. And when he got it, he took advantage of it. So big ups to him. And he's certainly our defensive player of the week with those 2 sacks.
Of course. And Lou, you bring up a good point. We covered James Houston during the offseason, during the preseason games, training camp, all of that. And Dan Campbell had nothing but great things to say about what James Houston was doing during the offseason. And he's had to be looking good in practice. So you would have to wonder, why wouldn't y'all have had him in the game? He was super impactful, kept them in that game. Those stops and that pressure on Josh Allen, keeping the Lions in that game. You would just wonder, y'all aren't winning anything. Why wouldn't you want your rookie to get more reps? It just doesn't make sense to me. But I ain't the head coach.
And that's been the deal with all of the rookies. We covered Joshua Williams as well as Jacoby Durant in the camp, out of camp, and many of them, even Joshua Williams, who's now playing regularly, started again this week for the Chiefs. He's been kind of in and out over the first half of the season. It's only in the second half when they've gotten defensive backs hurt that he's gotten more time on the field. Jacoby Durant had an interception, and I think it was his first game playing. I think it was the second or third game of the Rams season. And then he's been basically relegated to only special teams duty since then. So it's great to see these HBCU guys get an opportunity. And when they get the opportunity, they take advantage of it. I think it bodes well for all of these rookies as they go into their futures in the league. The fact that they have shown that they can make plays. They've shown that they can be impactful. And what you're going to see right now, and this week, James Houston has already been promoted to the active roster. He didn't go back to the practice squad. He was promoted to the active roster on Monday. So we'll see more of James Houston. And, he will probably draw some attention after getting 2 sacks in your first game. He'll probably draw some attention, maybe some double teams even. But if they don't, it'll be more of an opportunity for him to showcase his skills.
So you bring up Isaiah Land when we were talking about James Houston. And since we've talked, Isaiah Land did declare for the 2023 NFL draft. So that is somebody we're definitely going to be covering. The draft is in either late April or early May, depending on when that date lands. But Isaiah Land, shout out to him.
Yeah, and that's the guy that James Houston finished behind last year, both in the SWAC sack category as well as in the FCS category. Land had 19 a year ago. James Houston had 16 and a half. So it's going to be interesting because Land actually declared for the draft after last year's season, but decided to come back to FAMU one more year. He's coming out this year. I think he's already been invited to the Senior Bowl.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
So we talked about some current players, some storylines to watch out for as the season unfolds. We got to talk about a former player, way former player. I don't know if you watched him in his prime.
I did.
Another reason to talk about the Eagles.
Yeah.
Hugh Douglas, former defensive lineman for the Philadelphia Eagles and Central State University. He got inducted into the Eagles Hall of Fame. It was announced earlier in the season that he was inducted to the Hall of Fame, but during the Sunday night football game against the Green Bay Packers, the Eagles had him, his family. I'm pretty sure he had his son out there on the field with him at halftime. He got to give a speech. He did drop the F-bomb, but, you know, shout out to him.
Hugh Douglas has always been a character. Let me tell you, when he came out of Central State, I think it was his last game, they interviewed him, and he said, about to get paid. And sure enough, he was a first-round pick of the New York Jets when he came out of Central State. Played for the Jets for, I think, his first 3 or 4 years in the league before he did go to the Eagles. He was a sack master. That was his specialty, was sacking. And when he came out of Central State, he came out with the confidence. He was rated, for example, much higher than a James Houston coming out. This is when Central State had a series of powerful teams, the Marauders out of Ohio. They were one of the powerful teams in black college football. He was not the only Central State guy who was drafted in the NFL and played in the NFL. So very, very deserving. Hugh Douglas, always been a character. In fact, when he finished his playing career, he had a stint when he was doing a lot of television. I don't think he's doing it now, but always been a character. So not surprising that he would drop the F-bomb or say something out of the ordinary, because that's the kind of guy that he was. He was an outsized personality, so to speak.
So he was rocking Central State. He had on a blazer, Central State shirt under the blazer, repping, you know, his school. And yeah, once I saw, you know, when you just know somebody might say something, so you just tuning in. I figured something was gonna happen. So, you know, I tuned in. I was like, he gonna have some kind of quotable.
I had a big headline when he came out. The big headline said, about to get paid. And he came out, it was the same year that the defensive back from Fort Valley State, and his name is, that was a year there were 2 and maybe 3 first-round picks in the NFL out of the HBCU ranks. And the defensive back from Fort Valley State, he played with the New England Patriots. I wish we talked about this before we went on air, so I remember him because he did play and had about a 10-year career in the NFL. But both he and Hugh Jackson came out the same year, and it'll come back to me probably before we go off. But
Hugh Douglas.
Hugh Douglas.
Have I been calling him Hugh Jackson?
Yeah, Hugh Douglas, exactly. Exactly, James.
I hope I haven't been calling Hugh Jackson.
No, you called him Hugh Douglas.
Okay, I was about to say.
Right.
I can see them in the comments right now. You mean Hugh Douglas?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So no, it's very, very deserving. I think he had a good number of sacks. I didn't see the exact number, but he was definitely a sack master during his time in the NFL.
So we talked a lot about defense, defensive players from the past, defensive players now. Let's get into the players of the week. We already know James Houston, defensive player of the week, 2 sacks, a big fumble recovery on special teams. But who is our offensive player of the week? Week 12, Thanksgiving week.
Well, I had to go with offensive lineman that played most of his college career at North Carolina Central. He finished his final year at Rice University. His name is Nick Leverett. He didn't start the season as a starter for Tampa Bay and protecting Tom Brady, but he's worked his way into the rotation. So now he has started the last 4 games, and he's playing all of the offensive snaps. And when they started, you know, they were struggling with the offensive line. And since he's come in, they've played better, even though they've lost the last couple of games. But he's our offensive player of the week. The Bucs rushed for 96 yards, passed for 246. They gave up 3 sacks, but he was in on, like I said, all 69 offensive plays. So he earns the Offensive Player of the Week award. And if you want to go to special teams, I can while we're there, I can tell you that the special teams, a guy that we've honored several times this year, and this week he's back as an honoree in special teams, and that's Jamie Gillan, the punter out of Arkansas Pine Bluff. Spent his first 4 years with Cleveland, now with the New York Giants. He is 5th in the NFL in punting, and he averaged 48.3 yards per punt on 4 punts this Thursday, when the Giants played the Dallas Cowboys on Thanksgiving Day. So Jamie Gillan is our special teams player of the week for this week, for week number 12.
I think he swept, right? He's sweeping. But at the same time, Lou, you could have gave James Houston defensive and special teams, since he did get that fumble recovery.
It's a good point. It's a good point. I can always rely on you to check my stuff.
They are big boys. Two dudes can't get one dude can't get two awards, Luke.
He did have that was it a punt or a kickoff? I couldn't remember. Was it a punt or a kickoff?
Honestly, I just saw the action of it coming back. I didn't see whether it was a punt. I want to say it was a kickoff because it was deep. So it probably was a kickoff.
Yeah. So no, he played, let's see, how many snaps on special teams did he play this week? He played, in addition to what he played on defense, there were only 5 snaps on defense. He did play 10 special team snaps. So yeah, he got his name and got seen, and I agree with you. You're right. He could have been the player of the week for both defense and special teams, maybe a little more, especially, every guy that I picked this week, their teams lost. We didn't have anybody excelling the teams that won. So James Houston did his thing, even though they lost. So did Nick Leverett, who played for Tampa Bay even though they lost.
You don't got to mention all that, Luke.
Huh?
You don't got to mention all that.
we just being truthful. We have to choose from what we can, and sometimes the pickings are very slim. But we're encouraged by the fact that these guys are making plays in their first years in the league, and looks like they're going to have a bright future.
Well, we're rolling to week 13.
We didn't mention. Did we mention that Teron Armstead, the most veteran NFL player from the HBCU ranks out of Arkansas Pine Bluff, the offensive tackle with Miami, went out of the game early with a pectoral muscle, and they initially thought he would be gone for the rest of the season, but the initial medical reports say that he probably will miss some games, but he should be back before the season is over.
They definitely need Teron in the trenches, especially for a playoff run. So prayers up to him. Hopefully he'll be back soon. He's a core part of that Miami Dolphins offense. But can we roll to week 13 now? You got everything?
Yes, we can roll. We can roll. Didn't want to leave the big man Teron. He's the veteran, most veteran HBCU player in the league right now.
Well, guys, now we are rolling to week 13 of the NFL season, kicking off on Thursday night. We're going to be looking out for all these storylines. And, of course, James Houston, I think, is going to be the biggest piece a lot of people are going to be looking out for. They play the Jacksonville Jaguars week 13, so let's see how it all shakes out. I am Symone Stanley. He is Luke. This is the HBCU NFL Report on HBCU Game Day.